You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Packers Talk.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV. Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. How we doing, Sean?
We're rushing, Gil. It's been a day, but you know what? Hey, we're getting ready for the grind of the season. So we're not going to have a lot more free time coming up soon. And also our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King, well, they know about that too. And again, our show is sponsored by Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, they've been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans, as well as Bucks tickets, Summerfest tickets, and Brewers tickets. Go get Brewer tickets, by the way. They are a fun team to watch right now. Go see The Miz, and you can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit the locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. Remember to support local Wisconsin businesses, and you can watch every episode of No Huddle Radio on Packers Talk Network on YouTube with Gil and myself. Click on the bell, turn the notifications on, join the discussion, chat with us live. Love to see you and talk about the comments coming our way. And Gil, it's we're getting so close. We're less than 2 weeks away from training camp opening up, and Mark Murphy is going to be stepping down pretty soon.
Yeah.
And Ed Policy, it's going to be a new regime taking over, and it's bringing essentially a lot of questions, a lot of possible scenarios, and which direction the Packers want to go. So a few things that we're going to discuss today.
I'm ready for it. Just to let everybody know, Sean has not told me what these questions are in advance.
No.
So I am going to hear it for the first time just when you do, and this should be a fun little exercise.
Yeah, and this is what we're going to call what's more likely, essentially. So we're just got a few things that we're going to bring up, but we're just going to discuss it. So if you're watching with us on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you may be, feel free to chime in, because these are some interesting scenarios, some interesting possibilities that could happen this upcoming season. Not saying it's going to happen one way or another, but just what's more likely. So let's get it started. And whenever we start these discussions, I feel like we always got to start with the quarterback spot. So let's start with the quarterback and the running back spot in a way. And a big question going forward is, we were talking about last week, is Jordan Love the guy? And we think he is. We think he's on the upswing. We think his potential is really good. And luckily, he's got a nice backfield mate in Josh Jacobs, who is just obviously a great runner, had 16 total touchdowns his first year in Green Bay with the Packers. So let me ask you this, Gil. What's more likely, Jordan Love throwing 35 or more touchdowns this year, or Josh Jacobs again scoring 15 or more touchdowns in 2025? Keep in mind, Love had 25 touchdowns last year, 32 touchdowns in his first year as the starter, but he did essentially miss 3 to 4 games last year, was dealing with injury issues all season, and the receivers dropping, it seemed like, so many more passes than they actually did. So what's more likely, Gil? 35 or more TDs for Jordan Love, or Josh Jacobs scoring 15 or more touchdowns?
Here's the thing. I think if Jordan Love was fully healthy last year, he probably gets very close to 35 touchdowns. And Josh Jacobs, if Jordan Love was fully healthy, probably doesn't get to 15 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I am going to predict that Love will be healthier, and I'm going to go with a slight edge to Jordan Love.
And I would agree with you in that scenario, where I think the Packers want to throw the football. They want it. Matt LaFleur wants to zing it. He wants to let it rip and everything. The receiving core as a whole struggled so much last year with the drops and just missed timings in the passing game and everything like that. And Jordan Love, I don't think Jordan Love was the problem last year. I think those receivers were really an issue. And you know what? Brian Gutekunst kind of made that known in the draft this year, because guess what? 2 of his first 3 picks were used. Premium picks were used on wide receivers. So I think that's them saying, where it's like, Jordan Love, we need to give you some help. And then Josh Jacobs, obviously, he carried a much bigger load, I think, than what was anticipated last year. I don't see him replicating that great of – I still think he could get 8-9 touchdowns, maybe even 10 touchdowns.
Maybe 10 or 11, but not 15.
Yeah, but if Emmanuel Wilson, if he grows from year 2 to year 3, if Marshawn Lloyd, if he can play with the explosion on a consistent basis and not be hurt, if Chris Brooks is a nice weapon that you add in there and mix in there as well. I just think because of the potential versatility of the offense, that's why Josh Jacobs' scoring number may come down a little bit.
Yeah, he could have just as good of a season, but maybe not as many touchdowns.
And we talked about that last week, just the effectiveness. If Josh Jacobs can be more effective, it doesn't mean that he's going to have better numbers than he did his first year in Green Bay, but he could easily be more effective. Now, let's move to the defensive side of the football, and it's something that we've been beating on the drum pretty much all offseason since the season ended in Philadelphia last year was the lack of a pass rush, the lack of a consistent pass rush that could get pressure with four guys, could get home with four guys. Rashawn Gary's been your guy, but you need more than Rashawn Gary. Obviously, there's a lot of heavy investment in Lucas Van Ness with the 13th overall pick in the 2023 draft. And Van Ness, he had 4 sacks his rookie year. He had 3 sacks last year. Supposedly, he was dealing with a thumb issue. Rashawn Gary is never, as good as he is, he's never had more than 10 sacks in a season. So let me ask you this, Gil. Even though the Packers are still a top 10 pass rushing unit, it's obviously an area that they're really emphasizing, it seems like, in the press, to the media, all that. So let me ask you this. What's more likely, Rashawn Gary registering his first double-digit sack season or Lucas Van Ness registering career high in sacks with at least 5 or more this upcoming year?
Well, I think both of them are likely, but I think the lower bar for Van Ness makes that more likely. Assuming Van Ness wins the starting job opposite Gary, and that is indeed expected, then I think he'll get to 5. I mean, he got to 3 last year with the injury, with the limited playing time. So, I would have to go with Van Ness, but I think both are likely to happen.
I think it's interesting because I feel like with Lucas Van Ness, he has to get to that number.
Yeah.
So I think with more likely, he has to show some kind of growth this year. He cannot keep going backwards. He just can't. So I think that's when you're looking what's more likely in terms of who has to get to that number, it's Lucas Van Ness. But it's going to go kind of hand in hand, Gil, in my opinion, where if Lucas Van Ness becomes more of a force and he gets to the quarterback more consistently, guess what? Rashawn Gary, that's going to open up the other side for him because I feel like I want to give a break to Rashawn Gary because I feel like he defended the run so well, and I think he's easily their best pass rusher on this defense.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's a lot of good teams on the other side. They slide a lot of protections towards Rashawn Gary. They make a point, don't let 52 take over the game. And if Lucas Van Ness can get better on the other side of the defense, on the other side of the line, it's only going to help Rashawn Gary.
Yeah, rising tide helps all boats, right? That's the old expression. And I think it works both ways. I think if Rashawn Gary has a good year, that's also going to help Lucas Van Ness on the other side. So I think that, this is definitely related. It's connected. I think both of them are going to happen. But I think Van Ness, it's a lower bar. And assuming he plays 17 games or close to it, he's got to get to that number.
He's playing for a fifth-year extension, essentially. He's playing for a contract extension this year, and that's something that it's got to happen. And the thing is, it's like if Lucas Van Ness, if he does get to 5 sacks, or Rashawn Gary gets to double-digit sacks for the first time in his career high 9.5 in 2021. He's been so close, but just hasn't gotten there. I mean, this defense takes another jump, and I think Jeff Hafley's an excellent defensive coordinator. And if he has a consistent pass rush, and if these two guys hit these numbers too, that's a good sign that they're getting home with 4 quite a bit, which is obviously the big point of emphasis after the Eagles dominated in the Super Bowl last year against Kansas City Chiefs with only pressuring with 4 guys all game in the Super Bowl. But yeah, it's gonna go hand in hand. And these two guys have a lot to say about the how far this defense can go in 2025.
Yeah, and I think you could add Devontae Wyatt into that equation to an extent, and all of a sudden, you might be getting a pretty beefed up pass rush from your front 4.
I'm hoping for it, Gil. It makes our team a lot better. And now we're gonna go and we're gonna split offense and defense right here with this next question for what's more likely, Gil. And a couple of newcomers involved with this. On the offensive side of the football, we're gonna get first-round pick Matthew Golden involved. And then on defense, we're going to get the new corner involved. That's Nate Hobbs. What's more likely this upcoming season? Matthew Golden leading the Packers in receiving, or Nate Hobbs leading the Packers in interceptions? Keep in mind, Hobbs in his 4 years with the Vegas Raiders, 3 career interceptions, only a career high of 1 interception in 3 of those seasons. And he's a guy who is very good against closer to the line of scrimmage, very good against the run, very good tackler. Just hasn't really gotten the interception numbers, but maybe we see something different. I don't know. What do you think, Gil?
I don't think either of these are likely, but if you ask me which one is more likely, I got to go with Golden. I just don't think Hobbs – look, Hobbs is a quality cornerback in this league. He's starter. He can play the boundary. He could play in the slot, but he's not a ball hawk. Mm-hmm. And when you add in the Xavier McKinneys and Keyshawn Nixons of the world, I just – can't imagine him being the favorite. And then with Matthew Golden, you're talking about receiving catches or yards or like
you can take it how you want to take it, Gil.
I'm going to say catches just to make it clear as to what my thought process is. And I think Golden's odds are better, even though I don't think he's going to lead the Packers in catches.
Yeah, and I feel like, too, with what the Packers typically do with a lot of their rookies is they slowly bring them along. Yep. And, I mean, Edgerrin Cooper, I feel like that guy should have been starting right away last year. But clearly the Packers like, no, he's pretty green. He's still learning. But then you saw when things started clicking, it's like, oh, boy, this guy's really good. And that could be very similar with Matthew Golden in his rookie year, too. But obviously, the early impressions early on in mini camp and everything like that has been outstanding, and that's good hearing for a guy that you used your premium draft pick on, and drafting a receiver for the first time in 23 years. You know, you're hoping to hear that he's going to be an instant help, but I don't know. This is sneaky because Nate Hobbs, I feel like they're going to keep him on the field a lot. Like, I don't think he's going to leave the field. Like, he's going to play a lot of the slot, but I think you're going to see him bump outside quite a bit. I just think with more opportunity too, he's gonna possibly get more opportunities to really make a statement on the stat sheet. And I feel like with Xavier McKinney last year getting 8 interceptions, the guy's a ball hawk. He's easily the best ball hawking safety they've had since Nick Collins, but teams are not going to make a point to throw his direction anymore. They just won't because he's way too good. And who knows? You put Nate Hobbs on one side and Xavier McKinney on the other side, and Nate Hobbs may have more opportunities than you think.
Here's a point of fact that will cut the other way, though. The Packers do not have a bona fide go-to number 1 receiver.
Yeah.
So just like last year, 60 catches could lead the team. Mm-hmm. There's no 106 catch, 1,400 yard guy that has proven himself yet. So I think that gives Golden doesn't have an incumbent who is dominant that he's trying to overthrow to get that title. Hobbs does. And I think that's a big obstacle for him to overcome. I'm going with Golden, but like I said, I don't think either one of these things is going to happen.
That's the beauty of this game, Gil. We probably neither of these things happen, but what if they did? What's more likely?
What if both happen? Huh?
If they both happen, we're gonna be sitting at our desk right now in January and be like, oh wow, like we'll
play this clip is what we'll do.
That's a pretty good scenario that we mapped out. But let's stick with the offense and the defense. And last year, the Packers offensive line, outside of that final game against the Eagles where Elton Jenkins left with an injury and everything seemed to fall apart, Packers offensive line, when healthy, it was a pretty darn good unit last year. They were second in sacks allowed last season, only allowing 22 throughout the course of last season. Obviously, Elton Jenkins is great. Rasheed Walker has been more than serviceable left tackle, but Zach Tom, the right tackle, is probably the best offensive lineman on this team right now. And he's eligible for a new contract. He should get a new contract, in my opinion. But then on the defensive side of the ball, I was just mentioning Edgerrin Cooper, where this kid has got some serious talent. He led the team in tackles for loss despite only playing a certain percentage of snaps and only starting 4 games for the Packers as a rookie last year. Obviously, he's a guy who probably isn't going to leave the field this year. So Let me ask you this, though, Gil, where I feel like Zach Tom is very well respected by his peers. He was third in voting in the AP All-Pro voting last year for tackles. And Edgerrin Cooper was a guy who really just came screaming onto the scene when he got a full-time role. So what's more likely this year? Zach Tom wins the Protector of the Year, which is a new award this season in the NFL given to the best offensive lineman in football, or Edgerrin Cooper wins Defensive Player of the Year. Keep in mind, Clay Matthews in his second year in 2010 was second in the voting for Defensive Player of the Year, just a vote or two behind Troy Polamalu. So it's possible. So What's more likely between these two scenarios?
I'm going to go with Cooper, but not by much. I think Zach Tom, like, offensive line is so much about reputation. Yeah. And, there's not, yes, you have your analytics and they're better at statistics than they were in the past. But even those statistics are subjective, and you're not like going to open up your typical, if anyone still reads a newspaper, but you don't go on a website and see. You have to seek out those kind of numbers. They're not just there. I think Zach Tom has a lot to play for, but I just think reputation will have to catch up with him. So I think maybe he's a year away from being a really top candidate for Protector of the Year, whereas I think Cooper's just going to go nuts this year.
And I would think, too, where you talk about reputation, I agree with you there with Protector of the Year, where we know, Green Bay Packer fans, we know how good Zach Tom is.
Right.
We don't want that guy to leave. I personally don't. I want him to be in Green Bay long term because he is that good of a player. But you got a couple guys in Philadelphia in Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson who are outstanding offensive linemen, and they also are the defending Super Bowl champion. So their reputation right there is already pretty significant. And then you have Deion Dawkins in Buffalo, who helped create the Protector of the Year award, and he was part of a Buffalo Bills offensive line that allowed the fewest sacks in the NFL. It's just ahead of Green Bay. They allowed only 14 sacks last year. A lot of that was Josh Allen and his mobility, but still, Deion Dawkins a pretty darn good offensive lineman. But I feel like with this Protector of the Year award, it's going to go, it's like the MVP with the quarterback now, where I feel like the Protector of the Year award is going to go to offensive tackles primarily moving forward, because those are the guys who get paid the big bucks. It just makes so much sense. It's not going to be a center or an interior or a guard or anything like that. But Zach Tom could be in there one day, but I think he needs some more years, where it's nice that the Defensive Player of the Year, it's kind of gone to multiple different guys. It could be a DB, it could be a linebacker, it could be a defensive lineman, and Edgerrin Cooper gives you a little bit of everything. And that's where I agree with you, where I think that's way more likely. And that's kind of sneaky that he could win the award this year.
He's like a Swiss Army knife. He can do it all.
Yeah, he's unbelievable, man. He's so good against the run. He's so good. He's good in pass coverage. He's learning in pass coverage, but he definitely improved as the year went on. But man, he's just awesome. He's just awesome. And I just wonder where it's like, I mean, what odds would you put if Edgerrin Cooper did win the Defensive Player of the Year? What odds would you put on him winning Defensive Player of the Year this year?
I don't think he's the favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he could easily be considered in the top 15 or so.
I would say in my opinion, if the Packers defense is a top 5 defense in scoring and yardage, I think Edgerrin Cooper he's going to be the guy we're like, yep, that's the guy we're considering for Defensive Player of the Year. So it's going to be interesting. Sorry, did you have anything else to chime in?
No, I thought you were asking me, like, where would you list him among the favorites before the season starts?
Oh, yeah. I'm curious. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, that's why I'm saying somewhere between 10 and 15, probably.
Yeah. Hey, put your money on him right now. So I'm just saying, like, put a buck on. If the odds are high, just put a buck on and win. I don't know what the odds are right now. We're not a gambling site, but I'm just saying, it's like just by suggestion. So let's focus more on the offensive side of the football, Gil. Obviously, the receiver room, it's a little more crowded now. You have the addition and the arrival of Matthew Golden. You have Savion Williams, who's a third-round pick, an exciting player with some Deebo Samuel, Cordero Patterson-like tendencies and traits and everything like that. But you don't have Christian Watson this upcoming year. But you also have a guy like Romeo Doubs, who is entering the final year of his contract. A lot of potential contract extensions that are coming up for the Packers this upcoming season and off season. And then on the offensive line, your offensive line was really good, but you lost Josh Myers in free agency. You let him go essentially, but you got Aaron Banks in free agency. You drafted Anthony Belton, but you still have Jordan Morgan, who was your first round pick in 2024, who started a game, who played some games before his season ended with a shoulder injury. So let me ask you this, Gil. What's more likely? Jordan Morgan wins a starting job, or the Packers trade a wide receiver before the start of the season?
I think it's more likely that Jordan Morgan wins a starting job. Whether that's going to be left tackle or right guard, I don't know. I think both of these things are likely, but I think it's more likely that Jordan Morgan wins the starting job. You don't draft a guy in the first round with the intention of having him sit 2 years in a row. Yes, the first year was partially due to injury, but the expectations are high. They're going to give him every opportunity to win the job. And when you add the fact that Rasheed Walker is in his last year and probably won't be back, they would rather see Morgan win that job sooner rather than later.
I'm curious to know your thoughts where if Jordan Morgan doesn't win a starting job, but if he's like the sixth man where he's, someone goes down, he's in immediately and he's your swing tackle and everything, and he's in on certain packages and run heavy packages. Is it fair to say that, this pick was a failure, or no?
No, that's too soon to say it's a failure, but I would say by next year, if he's not starting, then you start to use that B word,
Yeah, that's for sure. Because especially it's like with Zach Tom, a pending free agent, who I think the Packers are going to do whatever they can to bring him back at least. But Rasheed Walker may be out the door. Sean Ryan may be out the door as well. Jordan Morgan's not starting by year 3. It's a bit of a problem right there, in my opinion. But yeah, with trading a wide receiver, I mean, I don't want them to really move on from Romeo Doubs, but if they feel really, it's all going to depend on how they feel about Matthew Golden and Savion Williams, but more so Matthew Golden. If they feel like, yep, this is our guy, like this guy is going to be the number one guy, Romeo Doubs, they're going to trade him and they're not going to hesitate to do that. But I think it's very dependent on Matthew Golden's training camp coming up.
Yeah, I think how fast Golden looks ready to be a big part of this offense will be the key. And then, of course, Golden may not, but you don't make a trade if someone else gets hurt. So, there's a lot of variables here. I think it's possible by the trade deadline that there is a receiver that is moved, but I think it's more likely that Morgan wins a starting job.
Fair enough. I think that, hey, in my opinion, that was a pretty good point to bring up, pretty good scenario to bring up, right? Because those are both significant possibilities, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely.
Now let's split up the offense and the defense. And obviously, we've been talking about the receivers quite a bit, but the whole discussion since Davante Adams left after the 2021 season was, the Packers don't have a number one wide receiver. Who's their number one wide receiver? And it's kind of fair to question that because they haven't had a wide receiver reach 1,000 yards since Davante in 2021 when he had more than 1,500 and then left for the Raiders. But then on the defensive side of the ball, Gil, it's interesting. They haven't had a defender reach 10 or more sacks in a season since Darius Smith in 2020 when he had 12.5 sacks. Rashawn Gary had 9.5 in 2021. And Preston Smith, he's been close the last few years, and now he's gone. So let me ask you this, Gil. What's more likely this year? And I think this is a very good discussion topic to bring up. The Packers have a wide receiver who reaches 1,000 yards, or a Packers defender reaching more than 10 sacks this year.
I got to go with the sacks, mostly because there is, as of now, no go-to receiver on this roster. So they're going to spread the ball around. And, they could be extremely productive. They could have a top 5 passing offense in this league. But Tucker Kraft is going to get his touches. You know that they're going to try to get the ball to Dontavian Wicks. Jaden Reed is going to get his touches. Matthew Golden, as soon as he's ready, he's going to get touches. We talked about Romeo Doubs. When Christian Watson is healthy, he'll get some targets as well. Yeah. You add all of it up, and I could see the team being very productive without there being a 1,000-yard receiver, whereas like Rashawn Gary has had 9 sacks in a season, 9.5 sacks in a season. He's been so close. I just think it's a little more likely that you get the 10 sacks from one player than that you get the 1,000 yards.
I agree with you for sure. And I think it's sneaky where Devontae Wyatt, I think, he could threaten double-digit sacks this year too. It's all going to depend on, I think Wyatt and Gary, I think are the two best pass rushers on that D line, and those are the guys who are positive. But it just depends on everyone else. And Lucas Van Ness, that's who I'm looking at, man. That's like he's going to have so much attention, and there's going to be a lot of criticism coming his way if he doesn't produce. I mean, it's just plain and simple. Like, the time is now for him. And yeah, if a Packers defender registers 10 or more sacks this year, it goes back to our earlier conversation. Lucas Van Ness is going to be a big part of that.
He is. And don't overlook Kenny Clark having a bounce back year. If he's healthy and his health was the biggest reason for his fall off last year, let's say he gets you 5 sacks from the interior.
Mm-hmm.
All of that makes it harder for double teams to choose who to double team, who to concentrate on. You add blitzes from guys like Edgerrin Cooper or Quay Walker. There's a lot of options here.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's how Jeff Hafley wants it. But Gil, before we move on to our final what's more likely scenario, if the Packers do have a wide receiver who hits 1,000 yards, who do you think it would be?
I would think Jaden Reed would be the favorite.
Yep. You took the words right out of my mouth. Jaden Reed, he was on his way to 1,000 yards last season, but then he just had a rough final month of the year. He was clearly dinged up. He still had 850 receiving yards last year.
Yes, he was close.
He was very close. He just couldn't finish the year, and I feel like he's more primed to get to 1,000 more than anybody else. So let me ask you, Gil, the last scenario coming up. Now, obviously, first 2 years that Jordan Love is the starter, the Packers, despite being the youngest team in football the last 2 years, they've reached the playoffs. But they've also been the number 7 seed in the NFC playoffs. They've been the very last team each of those 2 years. Packers obviously part of a loaded division. Detroit is still going to probably be a pretty darn good football team. Minnesota, they surprised a lot of people last year. They look like they're not slowing down, but it's very dependent on J.J. McCarthy. The Bears, well, they're the offseason champs once again, so they feel good about themselves. But let me ask you this, Gil, because obviously they've been very close to missing the playoffs the last 2 years, but they've been close to threatening the division, especially last year. So what's more likely this year? The Packers win the NFC North or the Packers miss the playoffs?
I think it's more likely that they win the North. I could see the Lions taking a little step back with the new coordinators. The loss of Frank Ragnow is going to hurt that team. Big time.
Oh, yeah.
What a great player he was. And, I could see the Packers being very competitive in the North. One injury to the wrong player and the whole thing, all bets are off for the playoffs. If Jordan Love is missing 10 games, that changes the equation. No offense to Malik Willis, but it changes the equation dramatically. If Josh Jacobs goes down, it changes the equation dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more likely that the Packers win the North, but one injury could change that in a heartbeat.
I agree with you too, just because I think this team is very loaded with talent. I think they're very deep. I think it's more likely to win the division as well. And hey, last year they went 1-5 in divisional games. They're due for a bounce back against the division. Yeah. That's just my opinion.
Just get to 3-3 and that's a huge difference.
Oh yeah. 3-3 in the division. Anything can happen. So it's going to be interesting coming up. But yeah, I think it's more likely that they do win the NFC North. It just seems like a team that's bought in, that's on the right trajectory, where they have guys who are just all in. And I think they got good coaching on offense and defense right now. Could be a nice season, but obviously missing the playoffs would be a huge, huge disappointment. So, Gil, that was what's more likely. So I'm glad you did that with no notes ahead of time. So
no notes, didn't know what was coming. And
I give
you credit. These were good. These were good questions.
I did my best. I had to go deep into the brain well, so that's just like, but I didn't want to dig too deep because that could be a little dangerous. So, Gil, before we wrap up with some trivia, what articles do you have coming up on Packers Post Cheesehead TV? We're less than 2 weeks away from the dawn of training camp. What do you got cooking?
Well, for Packers Post, I'm starting to do 3 big questions for each position group. So I've done quarterbacks, I've done defensive tackles, and I'll keep posting those one a day, Monday through Friday, up until the time when training camp starts and I've exhausted each position. And then over on Cheesehead, I did a piece on Chris Brooks and whether or not he'll make the roster. It's a numbers game. I talked about, his skill set, his strengths, but is there room for him on this roster?
I love Chris Brooks. We've talked about how much we love Chris Brooks, but we could very well see him not making this team, and it's not going to. And if he doesn't, it's not his fault. I mean, that's like he will have a job immediately on another NFL team if he doesn't make it. But I'm pulling for him to make it, but I get it if he doesn't. So, Gil, I hear storms rolling in outside, so hopefully I can get some trivia in before, and hopefully I don't lose power or anything. So, you ready for some trivia? So
I am ready for some trivia.
All right, let's beat the storm right away. So, the Packers, they have a great young tight end right now in Tucker Kraft. You probably know about him. He could be a big part of the Packers offense this upcoming season. He had 50 receptions for 707 yards, scored 7 touchdowns last season. Now, Kraft continues to improve like he has so far in his early NFL career. He could someday beat the Packers' all-time receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns for tight ends in the history of the franchise, which are all held currently by Paul Kaufman. Now, Kaufman still holds the single-season receiving yardage record by a tight end in Packers history when he registered 814 yards during the 1983 season. Gil, who holds the Packers tight end single-season receptions and touchdown records?
Single-season touchdowns, I think, is Bubba Franks, if I'm not mistaken.
It is not. It is not Bubba Franks.
Okay.
Do you know receptions?
And it's not Kaufman.
It's not Kaufman, but I didn't say, I didn't exclude Kaufman, though, from touchdown records, though.
Right. Okay. Boy. Single season, I'm going to go with Mark Chimura for the catches.
It's a great guess. He's up there, but no, he wasn't.
Okay.
So you ready? You ready for me to reveal the answer?
Go for it.
All right. So receptions was Jermichael Finley with 61 receptions. And then Paul Kaufman also holds the touchdowns record, and he's tied with Robert Tonyan, who also had 11 touchdowns. Tonyan had 11 touchdowns during the 2020 season. Kaufman also had 11 touchdowns during that 1983 season where he had 814 yards.
That was such a great team. The offense, the passing, John Jefferson, James Lofton, and Paul Kaufman.
Good stuff. And hopefully we're going to replicate that here coming up in 2025.
I love it.
Kraft and Reed and Golden and possibly Watson. Who knows? But Finley, though, had 61 receptions during the 2012 season. And Finley was probably well on his way, Gil. You can agree with me on this, most likely, to probably holding a lot of the Packers' career receiving records by a tight end. But his NFL career was cut short in 2013 due to a neck injury during his 6th NFL season. So it's crazy where I didn't realize I knew Tucker Kraft had a really good year last year, but I didn't realize how close he was to really breaking a lot of records. And he's a guy where it's like, man, I knock on wood, man, I hope injuries don't slow down his career, because he could go down as the greatest tight end in franchise history. And it's shocking to me too, with all the historic offensive numbers that a lot of players have posted in Packers history, they've never had a 1,000-yard tight end. And maybe that changes with Tucker Kraft in the next year or two. Yeah,
I mean, if you think about it, though, tight end was not a big position until the 60s, and the Packers didn't have good passing quarterbacks in the 70s. So there weren't a lot of opportunities for tight ends, and we've had so many great wide receivers. So there's reasons for that statistic, but yeah, it's hard to believe.
The trade-off also early on, too, was Don Hudson had insane receiving records that were held for 50-plus years.
Right.
And that was and for a time where it's like, holy smokes, when the passing game started to become a little more involved at the NFL level, then it's like Hudson's records started to get broken. But, I mean, there's a reason why his numbers retired, too. But, yeah, Tucker Kraft, I mean, that's a guy where it's like and I want to bring that up in the scenarios, too, where it's like, hey, is it likely that Tucker Kraft could be the first 1,000-yard receiving tight end in Packer history? But I wanted to save it for the trivia today, just to keep things fun and light,
Well, that's appreciated that you did that. So.
Yeah, hey, no problem. I'm here to please, Gil. I'm here to please.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us today. We'll be right back here next week. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packers Sean. Stay up to date on all things Packers, or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackersean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And a big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show. And thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.